Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look at the stories that graced all of our platforms over the past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside reporters Luke Mandato and Quinton Amundson. This week's episode is brought to you by the Catholic Children's Aid Foundation, which supports children, youth, and families served by Ontario's child welfare system through the Catholic Children's Aid Society of Toronto. From emergency essentials like food and safe housing to long-term programs that build stability and hope, your support makes it possible. This Christmas, visit ccafdn.ca and help change a child's story. Thank you guys for joining us. And also, I'd like to thank our special guest this week. Definitely no stranger to our readers. Peter Stockland, our publisher emeritus, has been helping us out with some of the stuff that is happening in his hometown of Montreal. So welcome, Peter, and glad to have you on board.
Thanks, Mickey. It's a pleasure to be here, back with the gang.
Okay. Well, one of those stories that we've been covering, it's, of course, when it comes to hate laws in Canada, Quebec always seems to make it into the equation. So the story here is the saga of Bill C-9 and its threat to criminalize some religious texts. So in a nutshell, Bill C-9 proposes new criminal code offenses, including one that would make it a crime to intentionally promote hatred against identifiable groups in public using certain hate or terrorism-related symbols. But what's been caught up in that is the Bible. So we all know that there's some of these Old Testament things that man shall not lay down with man and things like that. And they are causing a little bit of a problem for Bill C-9. So I know Quinton did the story on this. How about you give us a little bit about the C-9?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mickey. I think the main thing that is getting a lot of outcry from so many of the different religious voices, civil liberty groups, and legal experts is that the Bloc Québécois deal with the Liberals would repeal Section 319(3)B, which is a safeguard against the willful promotion of hatred charge. And I should add the quote here. So a person would not be charged if in good faith the person expressed or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. And we know that that is something that people are very worried about being repealed. The CCCB and also the Toronto Cardinal Frank Leo has come out saying that if there is this protection removed, there could be a chilling effect because clergy, educators, and priests, they're just going to be very worried that, well, is what I'm saying here, even though it's biblically based, is it going to be construed as hate? Could different groups possibly make a charge against me? It's creating a lot of confusion. And last week, it kind of seemed back and forth whether the Liberals would actually go through. But during a marathon meeting on Tuesday night, they ultimately did go forward with this intention. So we're going to have to see where this goes from here.
Yeah, because it's gone through second reading, I believe, as of now. So we're still, is it by the end of this sitting of Parliament that it's expected for third reading?
Well, we're going to have to really see about that because we've been going back from marathon readings of this bill to also cancellations. There was supposed to be a meeting yesterday, but they canceled it because there was a little bit more of that backlash stirring. So today, December 11th, are we going to have a meeting or are they going to cancel it again? So, I mean, it's a little bit topsy-turvy. We don't know what's up. We don't know what's down. And we're just trying to really get a sense of where we're going from here. But I guess to add some nuance to this, in the statements, everybody acknowledges that hate and discrimination is a problem and there needs to be solutions there. So I think we're wanting to see if there's going to be some alternatives to what's being proposed with removing this protection. And we'll have to see where that type of coalescing and negotiation could take place.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's in government in its inimitable way in trying to solve one problem. has created another problem. And of course, so much of this is comes down to Quebec and the push for laïcité. So Peter, of course, lives in Montreal and sees this every day. So maybe you can tell us a little bit some of your thoughts on Bill C-9 and the whole schlemazel around it.
Yeah, well, certainly it comes out of an effort by the provincial government here, the CAC government, to stop during the Palestinian protests, the Hamas protests over the last 18 months or so. A tactic that was adopted was to pray in front of cathedrals and prevent people from getting in. And the provincial government immediately said, "We're going to move to stop that. You can't block people from going into worship," or even in the case of Notre Dame Basilica in Old Montreal. I mean, they actually generate revenue by charging tourists to go into the basilica. So there was an attempt there, an effort there to stop that as part of the broader, under the pretext of the broader campaign for a secularized, not just a secularized state, but a secularized society. And that has now, the Bloc Québécois has picked that up and said if they're going to support the idea of these sort of bubble zones around places of worship, which they're intended to do, they also want this anti-hate speech provision supported. And so they've made common cause with the Liberals in a weird kind of Quebec secularist way, which is totally anti-liberal. They've managed to join forces with the Liberal to try and push this thing through.
Yeah, well, it's just this whole thing. What's getting lost in this is that Bill C-9 does actually have some good aspects to it, and as you say, like these protests have a lot of them they're intimidating, and it's trying to end that intimidation. We know that since the October 7th, 2023, the world's been turned upside down, and synagogues, of course, in Canada, several thousand kilometers away from where everything's happening, are being threatened by these pro-Hamas demonstrators. So the law is doing a good thing in trying to ban that. But of course, I know when we were talking about this in our pre-meeting, Peter, you said we used to have that law.
That's right. That used to be in the criminal code. That it was a criminal code offense to disrupt a worship service of any kind. You could be fined. I think it was probably a summary offense, but you could be fined for it. So this, everything old is, or everything new is old again, or everything old is new again, or whatever. But it's just the wheel turning. They took that out of the criminal code. It wasn't necessary. Well, if they had just left well enough alone, it wouldn't be necessary to introduce this. The other thing too, I think it's really important to emphasize, Mickey, just to get a little bit into the weeds, but the Supreme Court in the Watcott decision back in 2013 ruled that the criminal code law provision as it exists is perfectly constitutional, perfectly consistent with the Charter of Rights. And what they said was that Watcott was Bill Watcott. He was an activist in Saskatchewan who ran afoul of their human rights law there for passing out really, really vicious pamphlets about gays. And they were calling them gay people vermin and so on. And the Supreme Court was very specific that's not, you can't do that. That is hate speech. And they drew very bright yellow lines around what constitutes hate speech in this country. So this provision that they're introducing now is totally unnecessary. The law is already there as adjudicated by the Supreme Court. It doesn't need to be removed from the criminal code. It's perfectly charter tested and constitutionally worthy.
Well, here we go. They're trying to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
But that's what governments do. So, well, also out of Quebec this week, and Peter you covered this for us. We had the return of 62 artifacts, Indigenous artifacts from the Vatican museums to Canada. And how about you tell us a little bit about your experience? And you were at the news conference last Saturday, I believe.
Yeah, it was really a fascinating experience, Mickey. Just right from the get-go, it was in a hotel, a generic hotel conference room at Trudeau Airport, which is actually ironic in itself, given that the Trudeau, after whom the airport's named, in 1969 issued a white paper calling for the assimilation of Indigenous people. And here we were on a Saturday afternoon, and it wasn't a news conference; it was a celebration. It was an incredibly joyful you almost euphoric, and but at the same time deeply prayerful event where a number of Indigenous groups who had worked hard on this file got together and celebrated the return of these artifacts. The unfortunate thing was the guests of honor, the artifacts were missing because they were out on the tarmac. They couldn't be unwrapped because of the climate conditions. But with traditional and very common, good, Indigenous humor, the chief of the Assembly of First Nations joked that she didn't know what acclimatized meant, and did that mean that the air is different in Europe? Like how could they not, how could they not just unwrap them? But they were very good about it. But it was an incredibly joyful event. There were fiddlers, there were throat singers, there were like, as I say, prayers. There were 12 or 13 speeches that celebrated the return of these objects. The other thing that we shouldn't miss, though, is that this was not just a trip down memory lane, which is kind of how the CBC tended to play it. This was a very political event as well. And I don't mean that in any kind of pejorative way. This was a group of people who are, the tendency is to say flexing their muscles, but that's not right. They have made enormous strides in the last 35 years in terms of where they are in society, and they're going to reshape society. They are intent on doing that, and they're going to do it through initiatives like this, where they reclaim their history, they reclaim their culture, and they repurpose it, they reframe it, they reshape it as they want it to be. And that's we shouldn't miss the significance of that, whether we like it or we don't like it. We really need to be aware. We need to get acclimatized to the reality that we're beyond reconciliation now. We're in the realm of action, and these are not just kind of pro forma symbolic gestures. These gestures have real meaning. And one of the things that was emphasized in a joyful way, in a celebratory way, but in an absolutely unequivocal way by numerous speakers was, this is just the beginning. And that was not a threat, it was a promise.
Yeah.
We survived assimilation, threatened in 1969. We're here, we're not going anywhere. In fact, we're going to reshape things. And it was really something more, historic to see.
Well, Quinton's been covering this for us for a number on this topic and more in the whole reconciliation process. So, any thoughts from you, Quinton?
Well, I just think it was very neat being in Rome on the day when we had Bishop Goudreau and Archbishop Smith and Father Vezina, the General Secretary of the CCCB, meeting with Pope Leo to arrange the return of these artifacts. I mean, I was on the pilgrimage with 100 of Toronto Catholics, and we were on a bus ride to the installation mass of Cardinal Frank Leo at one of the minor basilicas in Rome. And Father Tim Hanley, the spiritual director, just said very loudly on the microphone, this is a great day for Canada for a number of reasons. It was already amazing because of this rare ceremony we were going to witness, but also the historical significance because of these artifacts being returned. And we saw later at that mass Goudreau and Smith standing side by side with Cardinal Leo celebrating that mass. So I could tell that they were very happy. People were hugging and applauding the efforts of all three of them as they walked in. And I know that I was very pleased with the speed that they moved. It was only 3 weeks after that meeting that they had the ceremony. So you could tell that the Vatican was determined to get this done very quickly, and good for everybody involved on the celebration in Montreal.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate that when they did actually, about 3 days later, they were able to unveil some of these artifacts and in Gatineau. And unfortunately, our Ottawa correspondent, Susan Cora, was unable to attend. She's down with a flu or something. So, but keep watching CatholicRegister.org. We will stay on top of this as much as we can. So I know a lot of the airtime has been taken up by three fellas here, but I think we're going to have to. Luke, he's sitting there nice and quiet. But Luke actually worked a bit for us this week too, and he did some stories. So one of the things, again, we're going back to government, but we're going to go talk about the Ontario government and the education sector and some of the conversation around Bill 33, which is, it's a lot of controversy, but anytime anything about education in Ontario, there's always controversy, and whatever government it is in, they're always the bad guys, according to the educrats. So, what this is, Bill 33, is the province is cracking down on school boards, and it's mostly for fiscal mismanagement. Though, in fairness to the opponents, a lot of this bill, I guess, on any whim, the minister could take over some of the school boards, which he's taken over six school boards in total now. Uh, Three of them, I believe, are Catholic school boards. So, Luke, why don't you tell us about how your conversation with the Ontario Catholic Trustees Association, they're worried about the whole Catholicity angle of the schools here and what it means for them.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. You said worried there in the intro. I think that's definitely the word to lead with. There is a real sense of worry among Catholic school trustees here in Ontario regarding Bill 33, which, of course, as you mentioned, is giving really sweeping new powers to the Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, here in the province. You had mentioned that initially this was sort of brought up to manage that financial mismanagement of some of these school boards. It's since sort of extended to give power to any, I think the term he uses is matters of public interest. So what it's doing essentially is dramatically lowering the bar for the minister to appoint a supervisor, seize control of a school board. Previously, there were much stricter guidelines, and of course, as you said, there's some people that are taking some great concern with that. So yes, I spoke with Mr. Michael Belmore. He's the president of the Ontario Catholic School Trustee Association. He's also a chair with the Sudbury Catholic District School Board. He's a veteran Catholic school trustee with almost 20 years of experience. He was able to speak with me about, some of the concerns that some of these trustees have. The biggest thing, I think, even more than the concerns with the bill itself, although we can certainly go back and forth on that, is first and foremost the sort of lack of communication that they've been receiving about this bill and with the Minister of Education. You mentioned that two of Ontario's largest school boards, the Toronto Catholic District School Board and the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board, are already under supervision. That's something that's been large in his mind, but he says, the biggest thing is that when this was brought forward and when this was passed on October 19th, just a day later, Mr. Calandra said that Catholic and French school boards are going to be able to keep authority on Catholic-specific issues. When I asked Mr. Michael about what exactly is a Catholic school issue, he asked me the same question. He said no one has really been able to define for him, what exactly a Catholic school or a French school specific issue is. He says those issues are never really in an issue-based system. He says they kind of permeate how Catholic schools run in its entirety. So there's definitely a bit of miscommunication on that front. He says this is the first time that a minister has refused to really meet or engage with different trustee associations, not just Catholic ones, but all of them. I'm not sure if that comes down to Paul Calandra just being so busy with this being introduced, but yeah, as you said, Mickey, the general feel is that just that Catholic trustees are feeling a bit anxious, a bit dejected, and even unfairly painted as maybe even incompetent, despite decades of service. Just because this sort of came out of nowhere, I think they have a feeling that it's not what it was initially brought forth to do. And they're just hoping for some more dialogue as this sort of gets forward and moves forward as it's passed and brought into legislation. What do you think, Mickey?
Well, there's this when it first came out, of course, was the fiscal mismanagement. Like the first board that went under provincial supervision, I believe it was the Tom's Valley, Thames,
Valley.
I'm not really, those old English words, they're crazy. So, but they there was a little bit of a scandal. Some trustees went over there to purchase some art for a new school, and I guess they went a little crazy and spent a little too much of the taxpayers' money. And of course, we're talking about a very small board in southwestern Ontario, and they don't really have it. I think the figure was about $100,000 was spent on this art, and there's in a small board, $100,000 can go a long way in educating the students, and I guess there's been examples of this. We've been reading about them for years and years and years, and no one's really done anything about it. And so, in fairness to the Doug Ford government for stepping in, and because I guess it was Stephen Lecce under the time at the time as the minister. Someone's finally had to do something about these school boards, some of them running amok, and we're not talking every school board doing that. So I guess it's sending a message out that, all right, stop messing around.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mickey, and I think that point that you referred to there might have almost been the tipping point that pushed this government over the edge to finally do something, and now they've kind of gone all the way the other way with that, right? So just really quickly back to some of Belmore's concerns. He said the biggest thing is if there are Catholic school boards in the province that are being appointed a trustee or being appointed a supervisor rather than a trustee, his biggest concerns and what he wants clarification on are first and foremost, is the supervisor being appointed Catholic? And regardless of if they are or not, do they have an understanding, a general understanding of how Catholic school boards are run and what sort of the Catholicity, is that the word you use, Mickey? Catholicity of how the environment and the spirit of the school is. So he says once he has some clarification on that, they can wait for dialogue to work out some of the details, but he really does want to see a bit more transparency as this rolls out. But
I don't know if you guys see this as big a threat as everyone's making it out to be. I'm sure the threat is there. This, as we said, this could be at the whim of any government now. So we don't like you guys. Boom, we're taking you over. But there's repercussions if you do something like that. And I know in the story, Mr. Belmore had said, hey, Catholics are voters too, and we'll get together and vote you out. And that could be the case. And of course, that always is going to, keep a government from reaching too far sometimes. So I see the potential for the threat to the Catholicity, but the Doug Ford government has said all along they will not threaten the Catholic schools in the province. So I'm not too worried about that. I don't know. Anyone else have any concerns?
I suppose I'm that's very interested in seeing where this goes, because we already know that there's so many societal pressures that make it harder and harder for these schools to really remain authentically Catholic. And now we're going to have to see if this additional voice in the mix, especially if somebody who is appointed, like Luke said, doesn't really jive or understand what makes the Catholic schools Catholic. I just think we have to kind of really wait and see where this goes from there. But I've been writing about it, and other people have been writing about it, concerns that we're maybe losing a little bit of that authenticity in our Catholic schools. And I hope that this doesn't lead to erosion. We'll see.
Yeah. Well,
You
this
know,
week's paper, we're going to see a lot of about the Catholic schools that are all the good stuff in it. So hopefully it hasn't eroded that much. Peter, you were about to say?
no, I was just going to say that, to your point, Mickey, I think one of the things we've got to keep in mind is that school boards are creatures of the province, right? They exist at the pleasure of the province. And the current premier of Alberta was part of a school board that got dissolved because of its incompetence. So, provinces can do and should do. That's their job. That's their role. But the Catholicity of it, I mean, is ultimately constitutional. It was accepted back in the day in Ontario after a long period where Catholic schools didn't, well, beyond a certain grade level, didn't exist. And the French dimension of it is protected by Section 23 of the Constitution, which allows Francophone students. My own kids, when we lived in Alberta, went to a Francophone school because their first language is French. So these things are not, kind of as, mysterious or voodoo as we might think. There are some clear rules around it, and you're absolutely right. Just to add that the province has every right, every prerogative, not to interfere with the religious teaching of the school, but certainly to oversee the administrations of the schools.
Well, from one Catholic issue to another. It's well into Advent now, and that means, as happens every year, somewhere across Ontario, across Canada, someone raises a beef with a nativity scene. Well, we've got good news. In the city north of Toronto, Vaughan, there's no problem with the nativity. Tell us about that, Luke.
Yeah, not just no problem with the nativity, Mickey. It's a celebration of the nativity, and as you said, this is a really nice story. So, in a time where some Canadian cities or towns might be toning down religious Christmas displays to avoid controversy, Vaughan, the city of Vaughan, has kind of gone the complete opposite way. They've installed a big traditional nativity scene right in the heart of their city hall, actually. And to take it a step further, they're making it a permanent annual tradition from every Christmas from now on. So I spoke with, that was proud Catholic Mayor Stephen Del Duca, him and the Ward 2 councillor there in the city of Vaughan, Adriano Volpen Testa, who's also Catholic. They actually sponsored a resolution in November 2025 that council fully supported, and it was to bring this nativity back to City Hall and to have it be sort of a visual testament to the celebration of Christmas. And so it was actually just yesterday, December 10th, the city held an inaugural celebration at City Hall with different remarks, live music with a church band that was there, refreshments, the whole shoot and match. I think Auxiliary Bishop John Boissonneau was there to bless the installation. And it's just a really good feel-good story, I think, as we sort of lead into the Christmas season. As you said, we're well on the way through Advent now. And when I spoke with Del Duca about, where this came from, he just said it was a desire to have a real celebration for something that the city could all get behind. And well over 50% of residents in Vaughan identify as Christian. He says that religious expression in the city has always been something that he takes very seriously. He says, the churches are well attended, the mosques are well attended, the synagogues are well attended. They also celebrate other faiths publicly. They did a Hanukkah menorah lighting. They did iftars for Islam celebrations. So this isn't necessarily something directly tied to Catholicism. I guess this event is with the nativity unveiling, but just it's refreshing, I think. And I think some of you guys will agree to see a town, a city, a council, a mayor, whatever the case may be, really get behind initiatives like this and not be afraid and not, sort of take a knee to the controversy that could linger with things like this. And it proves to be doing the right thing. It seems like the event yesterday was well attended, and there's lots of buzz for people to have this nativity out and in City Hall, public for all to see.
Well, we've seen it over the years. The silliness of this. So, it's no longer Christmas; it's the holidays. And in fact, I was at a Christmas show about a week and a half ago, the Andy Kim annual Christmas show down at Massey Hall. And he raises funds for the mental health, CAMH. And it was just funny how the CAMH, all the very professional fundraisers and that were there, and they were all, oh, it's the holidays, happy holidays to everyone. And every one of the musicians were out there, oh, Merry Christmas, all, Merry Christmas, which was, and you almost would have thought, you always hear, well, the musicians, they're going to be all progressives and that, and they may jump all over this holidays. Not a chance. Every one of them. Merry Christmas. And that was really nice to see. And we've seen the nativity uh, controversies here in Toronto, of course. I'm sure you've seen them in Alberta. And of course, Peter, in the Laicity Central. What do you see down there when it comes to the nativity?
Well, wow, the oratory here, they put out a big every year. Of course, it's the front of a church, right? I mean, unfortunately, in Quebec, you're more likely to get inflatable dolls of Grinches and half deflated Santa Clauses than all the rest of it. But nevertheless, people do. I mean, people put displays out, honor the season. And to come back to the event with the Indigenous people, I mean, that was a clear message from that event. We're going to pray, whether you like it or not. We're going to pray in public, and if you to watch it, it was, you used the word silly, Mickey, but our response over the last, say, half generation or so has been beyond. It's been at one level just silly, at another level neurotic. Like this kind of worried about offending anybody. Like, we should take a page out of the book of 630 Indigenous nations across the country who are saying, you don't like it? Plug your ears. We're praying. We're celebrating what we believe. And, I think that's a really, really positive development, a model that we can all adopt and enjoy.
Well, I just think that during this period where there are so many signs of revival and people wanting to embrace the authenticity of our faith, I just hope that kind of engenders a little bit more of an unapologetic pride. We don't have to cower. We don't have to be like, oh, we have to walk on eggshells because even though we're the majority, we have to, feel small and just practice in our own homes. No, it's, because of that silence, that's kind of been able to empower and tacitly improve all these, things that are trying to make sure that Catholicism doesn't really have a very glowing place in the public square. I think if we were a little bit more unapologetic and proud of our faith now, we could see more communities follow Vaughan's lead. That's my hope, and I think that there's evidence out there to suggest that could happen.
Yeah, I think the real crux of the story is in the pitch. Like, Mickey, if I came to you, in a different, an alternative universe, and said, there's a story where they're putting a nativity scene up in late December, I think you'd kind of go, what's the story there? That should be sort of the norm, right? But you look at today's society and what's going on around us. So when I come to you and say a city backed by council and mayor is putting up a nativity scene, you immediately went, we should probably look into that. There might be something there, right? So I think that just goes to show sort of where we are, and it's, as Peter said, it's a great sort of positive development, and hopefully more of the same in the coming years. We can only hope, right?
Yeah. Well, here at the Register, we're always going to say Merry Christmas to you. So, and I guess this is our first time saying Merry Christmas to you, and we will say it again and again and again, but maybe we'll have to wait to next time to give you our final Christmas wishes from Registered and the staff at the Register. So with that, I think we will bring this episode to a close. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Peter, for being our special guest this week. Pleasure to always have you on board. And thanks to Quinton and Luke for joining us as always. And we hope you can join us next time for Registered. Meanwhile, for all your Catholic news, be sure to stay informed at catholicregister.org, where we are constantly updating the Catholic news that you want to hear. And we'd also like to put out a special thanks to our sponsor this week, the Catholic Children's Aid Foundation, which supports children, youth, and families served by Ontario's child welfare system through the Catholic Children's Aid Society of Toronto. Visit their website at ccafdn.ca and help change a child's story. Again, thanks for tuning in, and we will hope to see you next week.